we've referenced healthcare, and I think that's a long subject. So I'd like to suggest we get to that, but I'd like to know before we get to healthcare and Chris Carney or Obamacare, what differentiates you think from your primary opponent? Because that's where we're going to end up at this stage.
Sure. Background and experience. I come from the private sector. I've been involved in healthcare and small business. And I think that's a significant difference. Both my opponents come primarily from government, either in the law or in the county government.
Well, and you do have two. I think we've been reminded from time to time that we don't include everybody in our coverage, and I think we've corrected that oversight. Would it be safe to say that you think one of your opponents presents more of a challenge than the other?
Yeah. Yeah, I would think Tom would be the one. That's simply going to be a matter of
primarily in law or law enforcement, if you talk about that, correct?
District attorney and then U.S. attorney, correct.
How about ideologically? I mean, there's and I don't know about Tom. Would it be safe to say that you are assumed to be, if we just say all Democrats are liberal and Republicans are conservative, which is not, as we know, we can't paint everybody with that brush, but that you represent a portion of the Republican Party that is more conservative than others. And does that differentiate you from him? And then, so is that accurate? I mean, I think that would be overall, if I were a voter, just my perception. Mm-hmm. It's not me as the editor of the newspaper, it really isn't. It's just, is that correct?
I would like to think that I'm the most articulate and the one most willing to explain in detail my positions, but I think my opponents would both argue that they're as conservative as I am. I'm not aware of any significant issue differences at this point, in terms of positions.
How about right to life?
They're both pro-life.
So you don't think that you represent a more conservative wing of the Republican Party?
No, like I said, I think I'm the one who's willing to explain, in detail how those proposals would work and take on the challenges. But again, you'd have to ask my opponents whether they think that characterization.
This isn't coming from your opponents.
I'm just saying that I don't think they would agree with it. If I were to take that on and say yes, I'm the most conservative, I think they would disagree with me.
Get to that, but,
right. I think they would disagree with that characterization. And I'm not running particularly as an ideologue. I believe that, and that's one of the reasons why I take the time to explain, not just put out this is socialized medicine, blah, 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 but put out a positive alternative, because I'm a pragmatist. I come to my political viewpoints based on what I think works. And I haven't seen evidence, having practiced medicine, chiropractic for almost 20 years, I haven't seen evidence talking to and reading about other systems that they function better. And that is not, again, to say that this system is good or that it works great, but I just haven't seen evidence that a more centralized control, quote-unquote, universal system, which I'm now understanding that this system doesn't even claim to be that, the one that we just passed. I'm not finding that the docs that I talk to and the stories that I read from other places indicate that it works better. It's just different. There are some things where you can say it's better because you can say, well, everybody has coverage. But coverage and care are very, very different things, as we all know. I mean, we've all been to doctors that we left the office and thought, gosh, I hope I never have to go back there again.
Back to me.
Does that answer your question?
I saw the heads turn. I got nervous.
I think the other thing is,
I guess it will depend
is
on
our
whether
opponent.
Or not. I guess it will depend on whether or not when this group, and I think you probably understand this, but Andrew's here as a reporter. He doesn't get it. He doesn't. This is not
He's objective.
This is not a democracy for him. I think it will what will matter will be whether or not your the other challengers in the primary come in and say, here's how I'm different than.
Right. Well, I think the second thing having to do with background is who our opponent is. A primary race is an audition. It's saying to the Republican voters, let me be the standard bearer. I'm the one who can slay the dragon. So that's the case that I'm making. So when we look to the fall and we say, all right, who's the opponent? It's Chris Carney. And Chris has a reputation for running a really tough campaign. He goes very personal, very quickly, and very hard. And I believe that that's what he will try to do in this fall election. And as a sort of part-time political consultant, my experience has been that the nature of the charges is less important than the believability of the charges. So in the 2008 cycle, the charge was that the Republican nominee was a tax cheat. And there was a national mood that said rich people are taking advantage. They're getting all the bailouts and all the help. They're the ones who are getting the advantages, and we're the ones carrying the load. And that resonated with people. It wasn't true. I know Chris personally, and he's an extremely honorable guy, but it resonated. And that's going to be the case again this fall. There's going to be a certain national mood, and there is going to be a narrative that each campaign tries to paint the other person into. And the question isn't whether or not there will be that. That will happen. The question is, will that narrative be believable? And in that regard, my feeling is that I'm the person with the narrative that is most likely to triumph over the narrative that Chris Carney will try to put. Because whoever the Republican nominee is, he will say they're bad, they're corrupt, they had it for 12 years, as Nancy said to me on the radio this morning, you Republicans had it for 12 years and you didn't fix it. And she's right. I mean, there's no argument. That's why the Republicans got thrown out in 06 and 08. But the reason we're going to see change in 2010 is because the voters still aren't satisfied with the change. And ultimately, voters get what they want. They do. It may take some time, but our system allows them to have another swing at it, another swing at it, another swing at it, till they get what they want.
If you're the Republican nominee, what are the cracks in your armor? Where is Carney going to take the narrative?
I'm not sure. I mean, he was very creative in the last election cycle. That was something I didn't see coming, so I'm really not sure. But I'm sure he'll come up with something.
What was your role in the hackathon?
I was involved early in helping him to recruit his team, and I did some field work for him towards the end in the primary, in terms of trying to gather people and get support for his candidacy down in Central PA.
And why were you the choice for that particular? Were you an acquaintance of his ahead of time?
No, we had met in the early stages because I had thought about, having just come off of a race in 06, I was approached by for state senate. I was approached by a number of people and said, look, you've just run in 5 of those counties. Why don't you think about running for Congress? And I had dabbled with it a little bit and talked to some people and did some of the background work. And I met Chris, and I was very impressed with him, and really felt that he represented the kinds of restraints that I would like to see placed on government. And in that regard, maybe that does go to the heart of this, the question you were asking earlier. I am conservative, but again, it's from a pragmatic standpoint. I've seen the evidence of government and good intention programs, and I'm not impressed.